When you're standing in the middle of a personal or professional crisis, your mind is usually racing with 1,000 different thoughts at once. Fear creeps in, your heartbeat accelerates, and suddenly everything feels overwhelming. You might be facing a job loss, a relationship breakdown, a health scare, or financial instability, and the weight of uncertainty can paralyze you into inaction. It's in these moments that most of us make our worst decisions. We react emotionally rather than respond thoughtfully. We panic rather than plan. We give in to our anxieties rather than confronting them head-on. But what if there was an ancient philosophy, one that has guided emperors, soldiers, and thinkers for over 2,000 years, that could help you navigate these turbulent times with clarity and purpose? That philosophy is Stoicism, and understanding its core principles might just transform the way you approach not just crises, but your entire life. Stoicism emerged in ancient Greece around the 3rd century BCE, founded by a philosopher named Zeno of Citium. The philosophy spread throughout the Hellenistic world and eventually took root in Rome, where it flourished among the educated and powerful. Some of history's most influential figures were Stoics. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, spent his reign writing personal reflections on Stoic principles. Seneca was a wealthy Roman statesman and writer who used Stoic philosophy to guide his life through both prosperity and adversity. Epictetus, who started life as a slave, used Stoic teachings to maintain his freedom of mind and spirit despite his physical captivity. These weren't just armchair philosophers. They were living, breathing human beings who faced real challenges, real threats, and real pain, and they used Stoicism as their compass through it all. The fact that you're reading about them over 2,000 years later speaks volumes about the timeless relevance of their teachings. So what exactly is Stoicism? At its core, Stoicism teaches that virtue, living ethically and in accordance with reason, is the highest good and the path to true happiness and inner peace. This might sound simple, but the implications are profound. The Stoics argued that most of our suffering doesn't come from external circumstances themselves, but rather from our judgment about those circumstances. In other words, it's not what happens to you that determines your well-being. It's how you choose to think about what happens to you. This is a revolutionary idea when you really let it sink in. It means that even in the most difficult situations, you have power. You have agency. You have the ability to choose your response, and that choice is fundamentally yours to make. One of the most foundational concepts in Stoic philosophy is what's called the dichotomy of control. This principle divides everything in your life into two categories: things that are within your control and things that are not. What is within your control? Your thoughts, your beliefs, your desires, your values, your judgments, your efforts, and your actions. What is not within your control? Other people's actions and opinions, your reputation, your health, wealth, fame, and outcomes. This might seem like a harsh division, but think about it carefully. When you spend your mental and emotional energy worrying about things you can't control, the economy, your boss's mood, what people think of you, whether a particular business deal will work out, you're exhausting yourself for nothing. You're draining your battery on things that are fundamentally beyond your power. The Stoic approach is to redirect that energy toward the things you actually can control. How you prepare, how you behave, what values you uphold, and how you interpret events. When faced with a crisis, this distinction becomes absolutely critical. Let's say you're going through a layoff at work. The layoff itself is not in your control. Your company made that decision. What the job market looks like, when the economy will recover, whether there will be new jobs available, these aren't in your control either. But what is in your control? How you spend your time looking for new opportunities. The skills you develop while job hunting. Your attitude during the transition. Your willingness to learn new things or pursue a different direction. The financial decisions you make to weather the storm. The way you treat others during this stressful period. The way you talk to yourself about the situation. By focusing your attention and effort on these controllable elements, you reduce your anxiety about the uncontrollable ones and actually increase your effectiveness in dealing with the crisis. This brings us to another essential Stoic practice called premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization. At first glance, this might seem counterintuitive. Why would you want to imagine the worst-case scenario? Wouldn't that just increase your anxiety? Actually, the Stoic approach to negative visualization is quite different. It's not about wallowing in fear or catastrophizing. Instead, it's about preparing your mind. Before you face a potentially difficult situation, you take time to imagine what could go wrong. You think through how you would respond if that worst-case scenario actually happened. By doing this mental preparation, you demystify your fears. You realize that even the worst outcomes are survivable. You're essentially inoculating yourself against panic by rehearsing your response in advance. Consider an entrepreneur about to launch a new business. Instead of blindly hoping everything will work out, they might use negative visualization. They ask themselves, what if the product doesn't sell? What if we run out of money? What if my key employee quits? What if the market changes? By imagining these scenarios in advance, the entrepreneur isn't being pessimistic. They're being realistic and prepared. They've already thought through contingency plans. They've already accepted that these things might happen, so when something does go wrong, it's not a shocking betrayal of their expectations. It's something they anticipated, and they've already mentally prepared their response. This kind of preparation doesn't guarantee success, but it dramatically reduces the paralysis that often accompanies crisis. The Stoics also emphasized the importance of rationality in dealing with difficult situations. Epictetus famously said that people are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the views they take of them. This idea, developed further by later Stoic philosophers and later adopted by modern cognitive behavioral therapy, suggests that our suffering often comes from our thoughts about events rather than the events themselves. When you're in crisis mode, your mind can engage in catastrophic thinking. You interpret ambiguous signals as disasters. You assume the worst about other people's motives. You spiral into worst-case scenario thinking. The Stoic approach is to pause and examine these thoughts rationally. Are you actually interpreting the situation accurately, or are you filtering it through fear? What evidence do you have for your interpretation? What alternative explanations might exist? By examining your thoughts with rationality rather than just accepting them automatically, you gain distance from them. You become the observer of your own mind rather than being completely identified with its chatter. This practice of rational examination is especially important in crisis situations because crises tend to activate our emergency response systems. When your body perceives threat, it releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your amygdala, the emotional processing center of your brain, becomes hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and planning, becomes less active. You're literally operating in a more emotional, less rational state. This is useful if you're facing a physical threat that requires immediate action, but it's terrible when you're facing a complex problem that requires thoughtful analysis. By deliberately practicing rational examination, even when things are calm, you build the mental muscle to access your rationality even when your body is screaming at you to panic. This is where Stoicism becomes not just a philosophical exercise but a practical technique for psychological well-being. Finally, at the heart of Stoic philosophy is the concept of amor fati, or the love of fate. This doesn't mean passively accepting everything that happens or becoming a doormat. Rather, it means accepting reality as it actually is, not as you wish it were or fear it might be. Marcus Aurelius wrote about embracing your role in life as you would embrace a part in a play. You might not have chosen your role, and it might not be the role you wanted, but your responsibility is to play it excellently. When a crisis occurs, it's a particular role that life is asking you to play. Your job is not to rage against the fact that the crisis exists, that's unproductive, but to accept its reality and respond as wisely and virtuously as you can. This acceptance doesn't mean giving up or losing your will to improve things. Rather, it means spending less energy on wishing things were different and more energy on responding effectively to the way things actually are. Understanding these foundational concepts, the dichotomy of control, negative visualization, rational thinking, and acceptance, gives you a framework for approaching crisis with clarity rather than panic. These aren't abstract philosophical ideas meant only for contemplation. They're practical tools that ancient philosophers tested through their own lives and challenges, and that modern psychology has validated as effective approaches to stress management and emotional resilience. As you move through a crisis, you have a choice. You can be swept away by the current of emotion, or you can anchor yourself in reason and principle. Stoicism offers you that anchor, Understanding Stoicism theoretically is one thing. Applying it when your world is falling apart is another. The real value of Stoicism lies not in knowing what these principles are, but in developing the habits and practices that allow you to access them when you need them most. In this section, we'll explore how to actually use Stoic thinking to make better decisions during crises, moving from theory into the practical reality of your life. The first step in applying Stoicism to crisis decision-making is to create what you might call a mental pause. When a crisis hits, your instinct is to react immediately. You want to do something, anything, to fix the problem or reduce your anxiety. But the Stoics understood that this immediate reaction is often your worst response. Instead, they practiced creating space between the triggering event and your response. This space is where your rationality lives. It's where you can access your wisdom rather than just your fear. How do you create this space in practice? One method is simple meditation or deep breathing. You might sit quietly for 5 minutes, focusing on your breathing. You're not trying to achieve any special state of consciousness. You're just creating a pause that allows your nervous system to calm down slightly and your rational mind to come back online. Another technique is to literally write things down. When you're in crisis mode, your thoughts often feel overwhelming because they're swirling around in your head, each one competing for attention. By writing them down, you externalize them. You get them out of your mind and onto paper or a screen. This accomplishes several things. First, it clarifies your thinking. What seemed like a million confusing thoughts suddenly becomes a more manageable list. Second, it puts distance between you and your thoughts. Instead of being immersed in fear, you're now looking at a list of fears, which is psychologically very different. Third, it allows you to organize your thoughts into categories, which is exactly what the dichotomy of control asks you to do. So here's a practical exercise. When you're facing a crisis, take out a piece of paper or open a document and write down everything that's worrying you. Don't organize it yet, just brain dump. Get everything out. Then, once you've written down all your concerns, go back and sort them into 2 columns. Things within my control and things outside my control. In the outside my control column, you might write things like the economy, other people's decisions, the past, whether someone likes me, health outcomes I can't prevent, and so on. In the within my control column, you might write my effort level, my attitude, my communication, my preparation, my honesty, my values, my daily choices, and my response to setbacks. Here's the critical part. Once you've made these 2 lists, you consciously choose to let go of the things outside your control. Not by suppressing them or pretending they don't matter, but by acknowledging them and then deliberately shifting your focus. You mentally release them like a balloon floating up into the sky. Then, you focus all your mental and emotional energy on the things within your control. This redirection is often enough to dramatically reduce your anxiety. Why? Because you're no longer spending energy on something you're powerless to change. You're directing your energy where it can actually make a difference. Let's look at a concrete example. Imagine you're a young professional who just realized that a major client is leaving your company, taking with them a significant portion of business. This is a genuine crisis. Jobs might be at risk. Revenue will drop. The company's future is uncertain. Your boss is stressed. Everyone in the company is stressed. If you're not careful, you'll spiral into worry about things outside your control. Will the client change their mind? Will other clients leave too? Will I get laid off? Will the company go under? Can I stop this from happening? Now apply Stoic thinking. You make your list. Outside your control. The client's decision, whether other clients will follow, the economy, your boss's reaction, the company's ultimate fate. Within your control. How you show up at work, whether you're productive and professional despite the stress, whether you take initiative to find ways to help the company, whether you start looking for backup opportunities while remaining committed to your current role, whether you communicate clearly and calmly rather than spreading panic, whether you maintain your integrity and professionalism. Do you see how this shift changes everything? You've moved from feeling victimized by circumstances to identifying concrete actions you can take. Your anxiety doesn't disappear, but it becomes focused and purposeful rather than diffuse and paralyzing. The practice of negative visualization becomes particularly valuable in crisis decision-making because it helps you separate realistic concerns from catastrophic thinking. In the example above, one of your catastrophic thoughts might be, If the client leaves, the company will definitely fail, and I'll lose my job and end up homeless. This thought feels true when you're anxious, but let's examine it rationally. The client left, yes, that's a real problem. But has the company definitely failed? No. Can the company adapt, find new clients, or pivot its strategy? Maybe yes, maybe no. Will you definitely lose your job? Not necessarily. If you did lose your job, would you be homeless? Probably not. You likely have some savings, friends or family who could help, and the ability to find other work. By going through this rational examination, you're not dismissing the real problem, but you're right-sizing it. You're separating what's actually happening from the catastrophic story your anxious mind is creating. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote extensively about fear and anxiety. He noted that people often suffer more in imagination than in reality. The crisis in your mind is often worse than the crisis in front of you. One of his practical suggestions was to imagine the worst-case scenario, accept it fully, and then recognize that you could survive it and even grow from it. Let's say you did lose your job. What would actually happen? You'd need to find another one. This would be difficult and inconvenient, but people do this all the time. You'd learn things about yourself through the process. You might end up somewhere better. You'd discover that you were more resilient than you thought. By actually thinking through the worst-case scenario, not as a catastrophe but as a scenario you could handle, you defang it. You remove its power over you. Another critical aspect of Stoic decision-making in crisis is the emphasis on values. In normal times, it's relatively easy to maintain your values. But in crisis, when fear is high and stakes feel enormous, values can seem like a luxury you can't afford. The Stoic approach is the opposite. During crisis is exactly when your values matter most. Why? Because your values are the only things that keep you grounded when everything else is shifting. If your values include honesty, you don't cut corners or lie to your boss or clients, even if it might help you in the short term. If your values include courage, you take necessary risks even when you're afraid. If your values include justice, you treat others fairly even when doing so costs you. This might sound idealistic, but it's actually deeply practical. When you act according to your values during a crisis, you preserve your self-respect and integrity. You're not creating additional internal conflict by doing things that violate your principles. You're not creating the kind of shame or guilt that creates long-term psychological damage. And often, acting with integrity actually leads to better outcomes, even if it doesn't seem like it in the moment. Clients, colleagues, and partners trust and respect people who maintain their principles under pressure. Your reputation is built through how you behave when things are difficult, not when they're easy. So another practical exercise during crisis is to articulate your core values clearly. What matters most to you? Not what should matter to you according to society, but what actually matters to you. Maybe it's your family, your integrity, your growth, your contribution to the world, your independence, or your creativity. Write these down. Then, as you make decisions during your crisis, check them against your values. Does this decision align with what I actually value? Or am I compromising my values because I'm afraid? This filter can help you make decisions you can live with, even if they're not the most convenient or profitable decisions in the moment. Another layer of Stoic crisis decision-making involves seeking input and perspective. The Stoics valued wisdom highly, and they understood that wisdom often comes from outside yourself. Seneca emphasized the importance of having mentors and wise advisors, people who could offer perspective you might not have. When you're in crisis, your perspective is narrow and shaped by your fear. Talking to someone who's experienced similar crises, or who has wisdom and calmness about difficult situations, can be incredibly helpful. This person can ask you questions that help you see your situation more clearly. They can share their own experiences and what they learned. They can often see options and possibilities that you're too scared or close to see yourself. However, the Stoic approach to seeking counsel includes an important caveat. You ultimately make your own decision. You gather input, you consider different perspectives, but you don't outsource your decision-making to others. You especially don't outsource it to the most fearful voice in the room. If everyone is in panic mode, seeking a decision from a panicked person will reinforce panic. You're looking for someone calmer, more experienced, more objective, and then you integrate their perspective with your own reasoning and decide what's right for you given your values and your specific situation. This balance between openness to input and personal responsibility is crucial. The final element of Stoic crisis decision-making is patience with yourself. The Stoics were not about self-punishment or pushing yourself to be perfect. Marcus Aurelius, in his own writings, frequently reminds himself to be gentle with himself. He acknowledges that he'll make mistakes, get frustrated, lose his composure sometimes. The practice is not to be perfectly stoic all the time. The practice is to notice when you're being irrational, when you're catastrophizing, when you're focusing on things outside your control, and gently redirect yourself. It's like training your attention. Each time you notice your mind wandering into panic and bring it back to reason, you're strengthening that muscle. Understanding Stoic principles and knowing how to apply them to specific crises is valuable, but the real power of Stoicism emerges when you weave these practices into your daily life, long before any crisis arrives. The ancient Stoics didn't see philosophy as something you studied during emergencies. They saw it as something you practiced consistently, building mental and emotional resilience that you could then access when you needed it most. This is the difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing it in your bones. In this final section, we'll explore how to build a Stoic practice that transforms not just how you handle crises, but how you live your entire life. The cornerstone of daily Stoic practice is reflection. The Roman Stoics were prolific journal writers and meditators. Every morning, Marcus Aurelius would sit and reflect on the challenges he might face that day. He would remind himself of the Stoic principles. Focus on what you can control, maintain your virtue, accept what you cannot change. This wasn't spiritual bypassing. Marcus Aurelius faced real danger, real political intrigue, real military crises. But by starting his day with these principles in mind, he was priming himself to respond from wisdom rather than reaction. Every evening, he would reflect back on his day. What did I do well? Where did I lose my composure? Where did I respond virtuously? Where did I let fear or anger drive my decisions? What will I do differently tomorrow? You don't need to write as much as Marcus Aurelius did, but you could start a simple practice of 5 or 10 minutes of reflection each morning and evening. In the morning, you might write down the potential challenges of the day and your intention to respond to them with reason and virtue. In the evening, you might reflect on how you actually responded and what you learned. This practice serves several functions. First, it keeps Stoic principles front and center in your mind so they're more accessible when you need them. Second, it provides feedback on your practice. You start to see patterns. Maybe you consistently panic about financial matters but stay calm about relationship issues. This awareness allows you to focus your practice where you need it most. Third, journaling itself is therapeutic. It externalizes and organizes your thoughts and feelings in a way that reduces their power over you. Another essential practice is what you might call deliberate discomfort. The Stoics practiced what they called ascesis, voluntary hardship. This might sound strange when we live in a culture obsessed with comfort and convenience, but the logic is sound. If you never experience discomfort while you're calm and in control, you won't know how to handle yourself when discomfort arrives unbidden during a crisis. But if you voluntarily experience minor discomforts, cold showers, fasting, simplifying your possessions, doing without things you enjoy for a period, you're building your resilience muscle. You're proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort. You're training your nervous system not to panic when things aren't easy. This practice has another benefit. It highlights how much of your life is actually quite comfortable and how much of your anxiety is about imagined problems rather than actual ones. When you take a cold shower, you realize that discomfort is survivable. Your body doesn't break. You don't actually die. The shower ends. You warm up. You're fine. This experience makes it easier to face actual difficulties with more equanimity. You're not facing complete unknown because you've practiced being uncomfortable before. You know that you can handle it. Additionally, when you voluntarily experience minor discomforts, big discomforts feel less overwhelming by comparison. If you fasted for a day, a missed meal during a stressful week feels more manageable. If you've sat with your anxiety through a cold shower, sitting with it during a crisis feels less catastrophic. Physical practice is also important for a Stoic life. The ancient Stoics believed in training both mind and body. Walking meditation, long walks where you practice being present and reflective, was a favorite practice of many philosophers. Physical exercise in general serves multiple functions. It processes the stress chemicals your body produces. It builds your confidence and sense of capability. It's a tangible area where you can see progress and improvement. It provides regular practice with discipline and persistence. When you're training physically, you're constantly dealing with discomfort, pushing your limits, and seeing that you're more capable than you thought. This carries over into how you approach other challenges in life. Building Stoic relationships is another dimension of crisis resilience that's often overlooked. The Stoics didn't believe in isolation. They believed in being part of a community and contributing to it. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in Rome, thought carefully about his role in the larger human community. Part of crisis resilience comes from having real connections with others. People who have strong relationships, who feel part of a community, who have purpose beyond themselves, handle crises better than isolated individuals. Additionally, practicing Stoic principles in relationships, being honest, maintaining integrity, focusing on virtue rather than advantage, creates relationships where people actually trust and support each other. So part of your practice is consciously building and maintaining relationships with integrity and presence. It's also valuable to study the stories of people who've faced crises successfully. This might mean reading Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, or Epictetus. It might mean reading modern examples of people who've navigated tremendous challenges with grace and wisdom. When you read about someone who faced something similar to what you're facing and came through it, something changes in your mind. It's no longer just a theoretical possibility that you can survive this. It's a demonstrated reality that people like you have survived and even grown from things like this. This is why AA meetings are powerful. People hear stories of others who've survived addiction and built good lives. Stories provide hope and practical wisdom. Building a library of such stories and turning to them during difficulty is a practical Stoic practice. Perhaps most importantly, building a Stoic life means developing self-compassion alongside self-discipline. There's a misunderstanding that Stoicism is about suppressing emotions or being cold and disconnected. This is not accurate. The Stoics acknowledged emotions fully. Marcus Aurelius didn't pretend he wasn't grieving when he lost people he loved. He felt the feelings, but he didn't let them determine his principles or his actions. He felt sad while continuing to do what he believed was right. This nuanced approach is more mature than either being entirely controlled by emotions or suppressing them. You feel what you feel: anger about injustice, sadness about loss, fear about uncertainty. But you don't let these feelings be the driver of your life. You acknowledge them with compassion for yourself and then ask, what's the wise thing to do here, even while I'm feeling this way? This self-compassion is crucial for building a sustainable practice. If you're using Stoicism as another way to beat yourself up, another standard to fail to meet perfectly, you're missing the point. The practice is gentle. When you lose your composure and react emotionally to a crisis, that's not a failure of character. That's being human. The practice is noticing that you reacted emotionally, being kind to yourself about it, this is hard after all, and then asking what you do differently next time. You're building a practice over years and decades, not achieving perfect equanimity next week. This long-term, self-compassionate perspective is actually what makes the practice sustainable. Finally, building a Stoic life means regularly reconnecting with your purpose and your values. Why does any of this matter? What are you actually trying to accomplish with your life? Stoicism isn't just about handling crises. It's about using your one limited life in a way that feels meaningful and aligned with your principles. When you regularly connect with this deeper purpose, handling crises becomes less about survival and more about staying true to yourself while navigating difficulty. Your purpose becomes your North Star. Even when circumstances change dramatically, when your plans fall apart, when unexpected crises arrive, your purpose remains. You're still the same person with the same values. The crisis is just a different context in which to live out who you are. The truth is that crises are part of every human life. No amount of planning or preparation can guarantee that you won't face difficulty, loss, fear, or uncertainty. But what you can do is prepare your mind. You can build resilience through practice. You can develop the habit of turning toward reason rather than being swept away by emotion. You can learn to focus your energy on what you can control and accept what you cannot. You can maintain your integrity and your values even when it would be easier not to. You can see crises not as evidence that something has gone wrong with your life, but as opportunities to practice the wisdom you've been building. This is what Stoicism offers. Not a guarantee that bad things won't happen, but a framework for staying human, sane, and true to yourself when they do. And if you're reading this as a young person in your 20s or 30s, you have something precious. Time to build this practice now before the real tests come. And they will come. But when they do, you'll be ready.